What's going on, guys? This is Tower number 9, and I got some footage here of 3 games between a Aggression Iden deck here and a Double Cunning deck from my opponent QuiShawnJinn. So in this game, I lead off with a regional governor, and I say waylay. And the reason is I don't actually have a turn 2 play other than a fallen lightsaber on the regional governor. And because of that, I want to make it so my opponent can't play Waylay to get high efficiency against the governor. I decide that I'm gonna have the governor trade with take out Greedo before I potentially play the lightsaber, preventing my opponent from attacking the base. Luckily for me, Greedo misses the top deck. So Greedo, if you discard Greedo can discard the top card of your deck when he's defeated. And if it ends up being a if the card you discard is a non-unit, it deals 2 damage to a ground unit. My opponent plays a 7th Fleet Defender. That's a card that I can handle relatively easily because I'm playing blue and have access to Takedown, which can pierce its shield. And I'm then going to give the Fallen Lightsaber to the Governor, so that's going to just give +3/+3. It has this extra bonus where if you're a Force unit, but the Regional Governor is, of course, not a Force unit. So now essentially a 4/4, well, a 4/7, but one that's taken 3 damage, so a 4/4. And so in general, I think I probably have a better late game than my opponent, and I'm trying to kind of control the situation and get there. And we'll see whether or not I can successfully do that. My opponent plays a Cartel Spacer. When played, if you control another cunning unit, exhaust a unit with cost 4 or less, I believe. So that's going to allow him to exhaust that regional governor. So here I could play the Wampa that I have in hand, or I could play the takedown. Because I'm trying to kind of get control of the overall situation, I'm going to use the takedown rather than playing out the Wampa. Just use that to clear the 7th Fleet Defender, defeat a unit with 5 or less remaining HP. That one only has 2 HP, and this does pierce the shield because it's just a straight up defeat effect. My opponent plays a Viper Probe Droid, causing me to reveal my hand, which has a Wampa, a Ruthless Raider, and a copy of Open Fire. Here, I'm just going to take the initiative. So this is a good opportunity for me. That regional governor that I have is going to be able to attack into the Probe Droid and defeat it, and still remain alive with 1 HP, still potentially be a threat or problem for my opponent, and we'll see where we go from there. So could be interesting. Looking at this hand, I have a Snowtrooper Lieutenant, which I probably don't really want, and I have a Viper Probe Droid and an Open Fire. I lead off by having the governor defeat that probe droid. So solid value there with the governor now having defeated Greedo and the probe droid and still remaining on the field as a potential threat. So as well as blocking a potential waylay from my opponent. My opponent uses the spacer to hit my base for 2 first damage that I've taken to my base, which I'm quite fine with. I play a Viper Probe Droid, seeing my opponent's hand. We see Surprise Strike, Boba Disintegrator, and No Good to Me Dead. Seems likely that No Good to Me Dead can exhaust Iden next turn. My opponent spends 3 to play out Boba Disintegrator. Very solid unit. I'm going to use Iden's ability to heal 1 HP. Action, if an enemy unit was defeated this phase, heal 1 damage from your base. So I defeated that probe droid early with the regional governor. Boba Disintegrator, it has this on attack. This unit's attacking an exhausted unit that didn't interplay this turn. You can deal 3 damage to the defender. I'm going to play my Open Fire on Boba Fett here, and my plan is to then just take the initiative. And I can use either the probe droid or the regional governor to trade with Boba and get him off the board pretty quickly. And at that point, it seems like I'll have a pretty substantial advantage in having kind of successfully negotiated the early game, taking very little damage and getting into a good spot. Interestingly, my opponent decides to play the no good to me dead on the regional governor, so this means the regional governor won't ready up. This is probably a play to counter the to this is probably a play that allows Boba Disintegrator to defeat the regional governor without taking any damage. So that on attack ability that deals 3 damage to an exhausted target of an attack is going to take out the regional governor before any retaliation damage goes in. So that's a pretty good combination for my opponent. But I have some stuff I can do here. So this turn I could do Wampa plus Scout Trooper, or I could play that Ruthless Raider. My governor stays exhausted, but I'll lead off with my probe droid defeating Boba. Also, because my opponent used that no good to me dead, may no longer have a good option for dealing with Iden. We'll have to see. Boba is defeated. Boba Disintegrator then takes out the regional governor with that on attack ability. If this unit's attacking an exhausted unit an exhausted unit that didn't interplay this round, deal 3 damage to the defender. I'm gonna go ahead and use Iden's ability to heal 1 damage from my base, kind of stalling here. My opponent spends 2 resources to bring out to play the surprise strike, dealing 5 damage to my base. I am going to. I think I end up playing the Ruthless Raider here. Um, yeah, so Ruthless Raider is a 6 cost 4/6, and when you play it, it deals 2 damage to an enemy unit and 2 damage to the enemy base. And then when defeated, you get to do that same effect again. Maybe an enemy base, I'm not sure. I don't know how it'll work with multiplayer games. I'd have to take another look at the card. My opponent takes the initiative. I'm going to deploy Iden, and then I'll just have Iden. Um, Iden attacks and defeats Boba. Now, I could have used Tarkentown here to defeat Boba and keep Iden's shield, but I decided to go for the direct attack instead. Keep that Tarkentown available for later. I might need it to deal with a Fet's Fire Spray or something, which could be a substantial threat. So I believe I healed 1 HP from Iden clearing out Boba. My opponent starts the turn with Jeddah City. So Ruthless Raider now has 0 power for the turn. I'm gonna play Del Miko. 3 cost 3/3 with restore 1. Each event an opponent plays costs 1 resource more. Fun fact, Del Miko in lore is one of Iden's teammates. And they fit well together in the game here. So we then see the Cartel Spacer, I believe, swinging into the base for 2 damage. I'll have Iden land a hit on the enemy base for 4 damage. We see 3 resources used here for a cell block guard. And I'm going to go ahead and spend 4 resources to play the Wampa. So the Wampa is a 4 cost 4/5 with Overwhelm. Not the most impressive thing in the world, but it has decent stats for price, and it is Overwhelm is a relevant ability. The main downside to the Wampa is that it doesn't have trait synergy, which is a little unfortunate. I'm fielding it in this deck because in general there aren't that many good 4 cost units right now, and I was finding that I was kind of missing some units that I could put down that were more aggressive rather than reactive. I will lead off by having the Wampa attack and defeat the cell block guard. The Overwhelm on the Wampa also deals 1 damage to the enemy base, and Iden heals 1 damage from my base. So if Iden can stay in play on her leader side for a while, you get a lot of healing because every enemy unit defeated becomes a point of healing to your base. Uh, I believe there was a tweet from Tyler Parrott, one of the game developers, that said that that Iden's ability was originally a reaction, but got changed to be an action on her later side because the reaction version was too good. My opponent plays Cunning and has to pay an additional resource for it. Decides to do exhaust 2 units, and I believe return a non-leader unit to hand, returning Dell to my hand. So those are the choices selected here. And then because a unit left play, Boba's reaction can trigger here and grant an additional, ready up one of those resources, rather, not grant an additional resource. So at this point, my opponent has Greedo and the Cartel Spacer. I play out a Starwing Scout, a 3-cost 4/1 space unit that, when defeated, you draw 2 cards if you have the initiative. Um, Greedo will then attack and defeat my Wampa, misses the top deck. I get to heal 1 from Iden because Greedo was defeated. Dil Miko hits the field. 3-cost 3/3 with Restore 1. Each event an opponent plays costs 1 more. Once again, providing that protection there. And my opponent trades the Cartel Spacer for the Starwing Scout, which means I get to draw 2 cards since I have the initiative, and I also heal 1. My opponent then plays a Crafty Smuggler, 2-cost 2/2 with Shielded. And we're going to go to the next turn. I'm feeling pretty in control of this situation now. We have equal life, but my board is a lot stronger. I have more cards, and, we're causing some problems. I have Del Miko swing into the enemy base for 3. That Del also has Restore 1, so that will heal my base for 1. Another little piece of value that I'm getting there. Hmm. Now, if the opponent has a Surprise Strike or a Shoot First, that Smuggler could take out Del. And if he has a Surprise Strike, he could actually take out Iden. Um, my opponent plays another Cunning for 5. I believe this time choosing to exhaust Iden and exhaust the Raider, and to give +4 power to the +4 power to the Smuggler there. So that Smuggler is going to be able to attack for 6 damage potentially. Luckily for me, I have a great counter. Once again, a takedown used here. So takedown, just defeating a unit with 5 or less remaining HP, manages to take down that Smuggler through the shield before he can attack, and I heal my base for 1. That was a pretty high impact takedown, as I would have otherwise taken 6 damage. My opponent plays Greedo, so one thing I could do here, I can play the regional governor. I play the regional governor, and I forget what card I say here. I think it might be Surprise Strike. Just trying to close off it. I don't remember if I said Surprise Strike or Fet's Fire Spray. I think I said one of those two, since those are the two kind of big things my opponent could have here to try to make get a dramatic result. Um, s Looking back on it, I think the best call would probably be Fet's Fire Spray because the Surprise Strike isn't as necessarily as relevant. My opponent trades Greedo for Dell. I heal 1 life from Greedo being defeated. Once again, misses the Greedo top deck. I think 0 for 3 on that, which is a bit unlucky. If my opponent's deck has like an average event and attachment density, we're probably looking at 10 to 20 events and attachments, or events and upgrades in 30 units, 30 to 40 units. So depending on where you're at, on the low end, that's like a 25% chance to hit with Greedo. On the high end, that's like a 40% chance to hit with Greedo. So going 0 for 3 is a bit unlucky for my opponent. Iden swings into the enemy base. My opponent plays Bodhi Rook, a three cost 3/3, and you get to look at your opponent's hand and discard a non-unit card. I have an open fire, a takedown, and a maximum firepower, as well as another raider here. My opponent chooses to discard my maximum firepower. I am going to attack the base with my raider. And at this point, I'm really kind of I feel like I've kind of successfully negotiated the part of the game where I'm more at risk, and I'm now trying to push damage to the enemy base and close out the game. The Ruthless Raider here, good unit for doing that. My opponent plays out a Probe Droid, which I think is actually maybe a bit of a misplay, not entirely sure. The problem is I have this other raider in hand, and I can just play it and kill the probe droid as well, also doing 2 damage to the enemy base. Now, to be fair, I think it's possible that my opponent just doesn't have anything else. There's only one remaining card in hand, and I suppose I could have used the raider on Bodhi and then cleared him with Tarkin Town otherwise. Um, and my opponent concedes at that point. So pretty strong result there for Aggression Iden versus Double Cunning Boba. Let's go to game two. So overall, that game, I felt like I was able to execute my game plan very effectively. I was kind of more the control player while my opponent was the aggressor, and I was able to stave off the early aggression, not take very much damage, deal with Boba Fett, the leader, relatively quickly, and then with my other removal cards and with Iden's healing, I was able to get into a pretty safe position and close out the game. So that overall went well, but we'll have to see whether or not I can repeat that in game two. So against shielded units, maximum firepower and blue removal cards are better than some of the other options available. So for instance, blue's removal is usually just straight defeat a unit with a certain amount of remaining HP rather than doing damage. So this is kind of similar to doing damage, but it works better against shields because it goes through them. Shields only block damage. Um, and so we saw things like we saw takedown being used there. Maximum firepower can also pierce shields because it does two separate sources of damage. So you can have the first one be a later attack, and then the second one be the final hit to defeat the opponent. So in this situation, my opponent leads off with a Viper Probe Droid, and I'm going to play a Scout Bike. So the Scout Bike that's not the card's real name. I don't remember what the card's real name is. But it is a 2 cost 1/4 with grit. So pretty solid opening move there, honestly. Um, if I had drawn a Snowtrooper Lieutenant, I could have used that to take down my opponent's stuff with that bike. Didn't see it though. I'm gonna play a Starwing Scout here, 3 cost 4/1. When defeated, if you have the initiative, draw 2 cards. My opponent is blocking my bike with the Cell Block Guard. Initially has the Probe Droid attack the bike, but then realizes that's actually not a good idea because it will make the bike stronger and attacks the base instead. So these grit units, like the bike, get stronger when they take damage, and that allows them to potentially do quite a lot of damage in some situations. So in this case, what I'm going to try to do this turn is use the tie advanced to give my bike 2 experience, which will then make it a 3/6 with grit. It will allow it to defeat that cell block guard in 1 attack, remain alive, and actually go up to 6 attack, which is going to be frightening for my opponent. Of course, he could trade the speeder bike or the Viper Probe Droid for the scout at that time, but that would still be favorable for me. So I'm going to bring out the tie advanced, giving 2 experience to my bike. When played, give 2 experience tokens to another friendly Imperial unit. It's kind of funny. The tie advanced is substantially weaker than the than Wing Leader, which is kind of the rebel equivalent of that unit. But still useful in some decks. So in that case, I have the Scout Bike Pursuer is the official name of that card. I have it clear the Cell Block Guard. My opponent trades the Probe Droid for the Scout Bike Pursuer. So now at this point, I have a choice. Either I can take the initiative or I can use Iden's ability to heal 1. I end up deciding to take the initiative. My opponent does have a 2-cost unit to play, so I think it would have probably been more beneficial for me to heal in that situation. On the other hand, my opponent might have just taken the initiative to make it so that my Starwing Scout doesn't draw two cards on defeat. So having the initiative, I think with with the Starwing Scout in play, having the initiative is potentially some card advantage as well. So in this case, my opponent does still have that Boba Disintegrator on the field. And I'm going to lead off by having my Starwing Scout trade with the opponent's Cartel Spacer. This allows me to draw two cards. I am also seeing myself as more in a defensive position here. My opponent's going to be able to deploy Boba Fett this turn, and I am not the one. I'm not the one who wants to be racing with more damage to the base. Um, Double Cunning has a lot of exhaust effects, temporary buffs, a lot of things that can potentially give him some more gas to push through. So I really want to I want to try and slow him down rather than trying to outrace. Ideally, I want to stabilize the board and get into a very favorable position before I start really focusing on damaging the enemy base. In this situation, my opponent deploys Boba and I use a takedown to clear Boba Disintegrator. This is going to also allow me to heal 1 HP with Iden this turn, which I will probably do just because I have a feeling I'm going to get some more actions before things are up. Boba, the leader, Boba collecting the bounty, formally swings in for 4 damage to my base. And yeah, I have to say I am a little worried here. There is a threat from so my opponent then takes the initiative without playing anything this turn, which is kind of annoying. But I will be able to use Iden's ability then without fear that it will make me lose the initiative. So I heal a point of damage from Boba Disintegrator being removed. And right now, so I've taken 9 damage. I have 16 life left on my base. This is a situation where I think if I think about this, this is I'm a little worried. We could see cards like Fett's Fire Spray potentially posing a lot of trouble. Boba is still on the field, but I'm hoping I'm going to be able to clear Boba Fett this turn. So I have a maximum firepower in hand, so my plan here is to deploy Iden and then max firepower to clear Boba. My opponent plays Boba collecting the bounty, second copy. I play out Iden. A really nice thing about Iden is the fact that she is shielded means that I don't have to worry about, like, let's say if Iden were 4/7, I would have to worry about Boba defeating her with a surprise strike here. But because she's shielded instead, it's actually worth more in this situation because I can't be easily taken out in one attack, even if my opponent has that buff. On the other hand, there's some situations where the opponent might have a saboteur or something like that, and then the shielded on Iden might actually end up being worse than just having more HP. So my opponent has a no good to me dead to exhaust Iden and prevent her from readying at the end of this turn. But that doesn't prevent me from taking down Bobo with the maximum firepower. A friendly Imperial unit deals damage equal to its power to a unit, then another friendly Imperial unit deals damage equal to its power to the same unit. So 4 from Iden plus 3 for the TIE Advanced is 7, allowing me to defeat Boba, and then Iden's ability heals 1 damage from my base as well. My opponent takes the initiative here. I'm going to swing in for 3 more damage to base with the TIE Advanced, and then I'm going to play a Viper Probe Droid and take a look at what my opponent has in hand. End up seeing a copy of Cunning and a copy of Bosk. So both quite good cards. But I do feel that I have gained the advantage here. In that the situation is looking fairly stable. Um, but we'll have to see. My opponent could still have some tricks. But overall, being a little bit ahead on life at this point and having more cards in hand and a better board is a pretty good place to be as the less aggressive deck. Um, okay, so let's see what happens here. Shoot first from Boba Disintegrator into Iden. This is a very solid move. So first, the on attack ability will remove Iden's shield, and then the shoot first attack will actually defeat her in one shot. So good combination there with my opponent's Boba Disintegrator. And then my opponent tries to get a resource back from Boba Fett, but this actually isn't allowed because his ability triggers when a enemy unit leaves play. And Iden didn't leave play. So leaders that are defeated do not leave play because they remain in play on their leader side. They are defeated, but they do not leave play. However, there's also situations where a unit can leave play without being defeated. So, like if you play a card like Waylay and send an opposing unit back to their hand, you do get to use Boba's ability because that unit did leave play. So, just a little bit of nuance there. My opponent then plays Bosk and ambushes my Viper Probe Droid. So now it does get to get a resource back from Boba since the Viper Probe Droid was defeated and left play. I am going to play the Ruthless Raider and use the ability to deal 2 damage to Bosk and 2 damage to the enemy base. When played or when defeated, deal 2 damage to an enemy base and 2 damage to an enemy unit. So the damage landing there puts me in a pretty decent spot. My opponent takes the initiative. Because Iden was defeated this turn as a unit, she went back exhausted, and I was not able to use any healing from Bosk being defeated. But at this point, I think I'm going to be okay. I can potentially push 7 damage to the opposing base this turn. 9 damage if I use my 9 damage if I use my Snowtrooper Lieutenant. So I'm overall feeling pretty confident about this phase in the game, but we'll have to see. My opponent is going to play a Change of Heart to gain control of the Ruthless Raider. So Change of Heart is a 6-cost cunning event that you gain control of an opposing unit for the turn. So in light of that, I need to attack with my TIE Advanced before the Raider attacks and defeats it. So what I'm going to do here is, yes, there's Change of Heart. What I'm going to do here is play a Snowtrooper Lieutenant and have the TIE Advanced attack for 5 total damage. So my opponent now has 5 life remaining. The Raider will, of course, be able to attack and defeat my TIE Advanced, but I can potentially then be in a position to still use it next turn, and hopefully I should have enough stuff here to close the game. Um, so I think I end up playing Del here. Yeah, so I played Del Miko. We saw him in the previous game, but 3-cost 3/3 with Restore 1 and makes enemy units or it makes enemy events cost 1 more. If I had had him at the start of this turn, my opponent would not have been able to play the Change of Heart, or at the very least would have had to attack and defeat Del first. Boba can of course attack and defeat Del, but in doing so would be vulnerable to being removed by Tarkin Town. We do see Boba attack and defeat Del. I decide that I'm just going to take the initiative here. The thing is, I could defeat Boba with Tarkintown, but I actually have a much stronger play available, which is my Raider has taken 3 damage, and thus has only 3 life remaining. So I have a nearly guaranteed win here because all I have to do is attack with the Raider, leaving my opponent on 1 life or 1 HP on the base. And then if I use, regardless of what else happens, if I use Tarkintown on my own Raider, the when defeated effect will deal 2 damage to the enemy base and I'll win the game. So I lead off by having the Raider attack, landing 4 damage on the base, and for my opponent to win here, I'm actually not sure what would get him out of this. He'd need to have some healing maybe, or something. He could play another Change of Heart and control the Raider and then kill. I don't know. It's a pretty unfavorable situation for QuiShawnJinn here. He uses Jeddah City to remove the attack from my Snowtrooper Lieutenant so that it cannot hit the base there. Or actually, he was signaling that, but actually takes it back and decides it might be safer to deploy a cell block guard instead. But then I use Tarkintown on my own Raider, and the when defeated attack effect will win. So when played and when defeated, deal 2 damage to an enemy unit and 2 damage to an enemy base. So the 2 damage to base there closes the game. Little Nice little move there. A similar move can be used with K2SO, who also has a when defeated attack that effect that can damage the enemy base. Sometimes using Tarkin Town on your own unit can be what you need in order to get the win. So solid result there. Currently 2-0, and we decided we are going to play a third game. So let's see how that third game is going to go. All right, round three of Aggression Iden versus Double Cunning Boba. I'm going to pay one for a or my opponent pays one for Greedo. I'm going to pay two for the Scout Bike Pursuer. So Greedo, one cost 3/1. When defeated, you may discard a card from your deck. If it is not a unit, deal two damage to a ground unit. So Greedo could trade with the Scout Bike Pursuer if my opponent hits the top deck. However, the Scout Bike Pursuer can defeat Greedo and maybe remain alive. More likely than not, remain alive since the opposing deck probably has more units than non-units. So overall, probably a pretty favorable scenario. So QuiShawnJinn here spends one for a shoot first, though, to allow Greedo to defeat the Scout Bike Pursuer without being defeated himself. Pretty solid value there, quite frankly. And I'm going to deploy the Starwing Scout, the 3-cost 4/1. When defeated, if you have the initiative, draw two cards. My opponent then plays Boba Disintegrator, not something I really want to see here. Very annoying unit. One of the most efficient 3-cost units in the game. I think it actually has the best stats of any 3-cost unit. Really strong. But we'll see how it does here. So this turn, I'm going to probably play two 2-drops. So I lead off by actually using the Snowtrooper Lieutenant to attack with the Starwing Scout. So Snowtrooper Lieutenant is a 2-cost 2/2, and when played, you may attack with a unit. If it's an Imperial unit, it gets +2 power. So I'm using this to attack with the Starwing Scout, even though it isn't an Imperial unit, because the tempo there allows me to play a card and also attack at the same time. And I think that having the Snowtrooper Lieutenant on the board is also helpful for me because if the opponent attacks the Snowtrooper Lieutenant with Boba Disintegrator, I can remove him with Tarkintown, and I can also potentially have the Snowtrooper Lieutenant defeat Greedo. My opponent uses Jeddah City to nerf the Snowtrooper Lieutenant's attack. I play Viper Probe Droid and see my opponent's hand. We have a Smuggler, a No Good to Me Dead, and I believe the last card was Bosk. My opponent then takes out Greedo, or uses Greedo to take out the trooper without taking damage in return, thanks to Jeddah City giving me -4 power. So pretty solid play there from my opponent. I'm going to take the initiative now. The Boba Disintegrator could attack and defeat my Probe Droid, or could push more damage to the base. We will see how that goes. And looks like it's going to be some damage to the base. My opponent then plays the Smuggler that we saw earlier. When you play this unit, give it a shield token, so 2-cost 2/2 with shielded. And I'm starting to get a little worried about the situation in the ground arena here. My opponent's going to be able to deploy Boba Fett next turn, and I would really like to be stabilizing that arena more. I do have a takedown, which could potentially defeat Boba Disintegrator. Um, the Ruthless Raider will be a really good card to play next turn. I end up resourcing this Interceptor since my opponent doesn't have a real space presence right now. I swing my Probe Droid in to defeat Greedo. My opponent starts to do the when defeated effect, but I'm like, wait, you probably don't want to do it since it could only hit your own guys. And so my opponent opts not to. That is a you may, so you don't have to do it here to potentially hit your own side. I will be able to heal 1 damage with Iden now, having defeated an enemy unit. My opponent swings in, doing 3 damage with Boba Disintegrator. I'm going to swing in for 4 damage with my Starwing Scout. Smuggler hits me for 2. Arguably, I could have used the takedown to defeat the Smuggler through the shield there, and prevent myself from taking 2 damage. It might have been good to do that, just because I am in fact trying to stabilize here, but hard to say for sure. My opponent can still deploy Boba this turn. One advantage of not using the takedown on the smuggler, though, is that I can use it to defeat Boba Disintegrator, who's a more valuable unit, especially because I know my opponent has a no good to me dead, which can potentially be very annoying. But my opponent actually deploys Bosk with no ambush, so the takedown is going to go for Bosk, defeat a unit with 5 or less remaining HP. So Bosk is a 4/5 ambush, and when you play an event, you can deal 2 damage to an enemy unit. So I really don't want that effect to be going off, so I use the takedown on Bosk instead. My opponent then hits my base for 4 damage, and readies up 2 resources from my probe droid, having attacked and been defeated while defeating that Greedo, and then plays another of those 2/2 smugglers. So this is a very worrisome situation for me. I am quite concerned that I will not be able to stabilize here. I do have a takedown. Um, this is kind of a tough resourcing decision, so I sort of want to have this open fire. Just because it's another removal card. I sort of want to have the takedown. I can do takedown plus Imperial Governor, or I can do the Raider. I can also deploy Iden this turn, of course. So what I think I want to do is probably deploy Iden first and see how things go from there. Resource-wise, it probably makes the most sense to resource the open fire. Yeah, so if I deploy Iden, my opponent will likely use the no good to me dead that we had in hand earlier to exhaust Iden. But the plus side is with Iden now deployed, I can gain resources from any enemy unit I defeat. I now use the takedown to remove Boba Disintegrator and heal 1 damage from my base. But I could still take 8 damage this turn, which is really not what I want. I'm I'm pretty worried about the strong ground board my opponent has here. We then see a waylay sending my Starwing Scout back to hand. I'm going to spend 2 for the regional governor, and I name Surprise Strike as the card my opponent can't play. The reason for this is that Surprise Strike is really dangerous for giving my opponent extra reach, and I want to remove that as an option that can potentially end this game real fast since I am kind of in trouble here. My opponent has one of the smugglers remove Iden's shields. That's like a shield trade there. And then Boba could now defeat Iden. Um, Boba could also, of course, defeat my governor. But at this point, the thing about the governor naming Surprise Strike is if my opponent draws a Surprise Strike and wants to play it, he'll have to spend, 4 damage on removing the governor, which would probably be 4 damage less from the base. So in this situation, my opponent opts to just go for all 6 damage from those 2 units on my base, which is not what I want to see. But it does kind of make sense. It's a good play for the opponent, but I'm not happy to see it. So in this case, I could play the Ruthless Raider and defeat the unshielded, uh, what's his name? I could play Ruthless Raider to defeat the unshielded smuggler. I could play Takedown to defeat the shielded smuggler. I have a entrenched that I could potentially play. So if I go for the takedown option, um, I can potentially entrench my own unit or an enemy unit. So I opt to entrench my regional governor here. Um, so regional governor now a 4/7. That'll make her more difficult to remove and also give her some nice fighting power here to try and clear stuff. My opponent swings in with Boba, dealing, I believe, 4 damage to base. I have the governor defeat the shielded smuggler, healing my base for 1 with Iden's passive here. I only have 6 HP left on my base though, and this other smuggler is going to be able to do 2 more damage this turn probably. On the plus side, I can defeat the smuggler with the takedown that I have in hand, and by defeating the smuggler with takedown, I'll heal another point of damage. So we do see an attack into the base. I'm going to go ahead and play takedown. I really don't like having to play something like that just to kill this lowly smuggler, but I desperately need my opponent's units off the board, and takedown is a good way to deal with a shielded target. It's also going to allow me to heal that little bit of damage. My opponent takes the initiative here. And at this point, if the opponent has a snapshot reflexes or a shoot first, that can actually just win the game immediately. Even though Surprise Strike is suppressed, there are a few other cards that can do immediate damage. So I have a that Raider and I have an Entrenched, and I can play them both this turn. Let's see how this goes. So my opponent leads off with another No Good to Me Dead. I'm once again going to be unable to do anything this turn. I have 5 HP left on my base. So if one thing I could do here is I could play the Entrenched on my own Governor, which would bring me up to 7 power and allow me to attack and defeat Boba. Um, Another thing I could do is entrench my opponent's Boba, which would prevent him from hitting the base. I end up entrenching my own Governor to go for the to potentially go for the lethal damage on Boba. Um, this does mean Boba's going to get a chance to attack and deal 4 damage to my base, though, which is not something I really want. Not something I really want. But actually, my opponent plays an Asteroid Sanctuary to exhaust the Governor. And I'm going to play out my Raider, dealing 2 damage to Boba and 2 damage to the enemy base. I can then take the initiative, and I'll be able to defeat Boba at the start of next turn with the Governor, assuming nothing else catastrophic happens. But I am going to be at 1 HP after Boba attacks, which is very negative for me. Um, so yeah, down to 1 HP, I take the initiative, and unfortunately for me, my opponent plays out a Greedo. So having another unit here means the opponent has basically won the game because I don't have a way to remove 2 units at once. So I can attack and defeat Boba with the regional governor. But and that will heal my base by 1, but Greedo will be left alive and I won't be able to clear Greedo. So that is going to be the game, unfortunately. So ultimately, this one is a win for QuiShawnJinn. I think that I would have done better on the previous turn to have entrenched my opponent's Boba instead of entrenching my own governor. So entrenching Boba does give my opponent extra stats, and he can use those to easily clear out the governor and Iden. But it would have prevented him from doing that damage to the base, which would have given me some extra time. I really wasn't expecting there to be another exhaust effect after he had already used 2 copies of No Good to Me Dead. But the Asteroid Sanctuary there was very effective. And honestly, there are other cards that also could have exhausted me in that situation. So Cunning, for instance, could have actually returned me to hand, which is even better than an exhaust there. Overall, I think I probably misplayed that one a bit, but a solid win for my opponent. In this game, I wasn't really able to stabilize the ground arena against a lot of dangerous small units. And while my board is a lot stronger now, my opponent got the damage in they need to win. That's kind of how it goes. And in discussing things afterwards, my opponent points out the regional governor did successfully suppress Surprise Strike, which he had actually drawn 2 of them there. So I'm happy I made that decision. I think that was the right card to name there, but ultimately it wasn't quite enough to get the win. So we that was 3 games of Aggression Boba versus Aggression Iden versus Double Cunning Boba. Ultimately went 2-1. So yeah, there's some footage, and I have to say, Iden, I was really not impressed with her at first, but she's really growing on me. I think she's actually a pretty strong leader, and I'm interested to see if I can to tinker with my Iden deck some more and see if I can do even more with it. I am going to have a link to that Iden deck in the video description below, so you can check that out. May have some changes from this version of it, but we'll have to see. And yeah, thanks to you guys for watching, and we will be back later with some more Star Wars Unlimited content, and we'll catch you guys later.